The 4680 ramp is going slow, but there are reasons to believe it could be improving, especially in terms of adding additional lines.
I mean, it's interesting. How do you see the thing that Tesla did, the Founders Series? Was it stumping all the reservation holders and they were like, hey, what's happening here? I'm first in line. But yeah, how do you see that?
I haven't heard that sentiment myself. All the people I've talked to have said, I get it. It's brand new and the supply is limited. They'll charge what they can. So I think people get it. And I'd be very surprised to find someone who is a early reservation holder who is not also a shareholder. So they can see it through both lenses. They can see it as, I'm a little annoyed that they want a few extra bucks, except am I, because they haven't invited me to configure. And as a shareholder, I'd really like them to eke out that extra substantial amount of margin while they can, because the days of $100,000 Cybertrucks is numbered. We just don't know what that number is.
Yeah, and you've touched on a very interesting point as well, and that's the limitation of 4680 batteries. Okay, that's a big one because, for example, the Tesla Economist, for example, tracks the 4680 batteries very thoroughly, and it was furious. He really much stirred up a lot of beef with the Tesla community because he's kind of Tesla Q now, more or less. So he's very furious about this because he's disappointed about the actual production numbers of 4680s. How do you see that? Is there something, can Tesla ramp up? What's your view on that at least? I mean, of course, you're the man of the numbers. You're keeping track of production numbers, but maybe your own opinion, if that's allowed. So,
sure.
Yeah, maybe.
So I had a chance to attend a presentation by a Tesla employee named Jen Gowdy, who works at a service center in Oregon and was formerly a engineer at Cato Road, where the 4680 was developed. She put up a slide showing, that's me on the line in my yellow suit. We know she's actually there. When anybody asked questions that got a little too real, she would defer to Jordan Giesecke at the Limiting Factor saying, I just know that guy's got an inside source. I talked to Jordan. He does not have an inside source, but he was amazed. He was touched that his content is so good that surely you must have an inside source. I said, I know that Panasonic and really everybody has been working on the 4680 form factor, some of them to potentially provide cells to Tesla, and all of them have had to delay their release of these batteries. Is there something bedeviling about the form factor itself that leads to production delays? And she said, I cannot answer that, because if I gave you an answer to that, it would answer the question for all manufacturers, including Tesla, which to me says, yes, there's something about the 4680 that's tricky. Maybe it's that having additional length, additional, width, the tolerances have to remain tight, even over a greater area.
Process, or the dry process that they are using.
But the other manufacturers wouldn't be using a dry process. They'd still be using a wet process, and they are also delayed. Lee from Tesla Economist is very frustrated at the 4680 ramp. I think we all are. But Lee's frustrations have gone so far beyond that, and even beyond what's reasonable. I had a discussion with him when the quarterly numbers came out. He said, why on earth is stationary revenue so low when it's ramping, when the margins are supposed to be very high? And I said, because a lot of these projects, you don't get paid until they're switched on. If you look at Giga Texas, they put in megapacks 8 months ago, and they have not yet been switched on. That's no fault of Tesla's. You wait for the permits, and permitting can take a while. Getting the infrastructure from the grid to handle something like that could be an obstacle that takes a substantial amount of time. Those revenues will show up at some point, at the appropriate time. I just don't know when that is. I fear that Lee may have dabbled in options again, and that is not a good thing to do. If he had just, when Tesla stock was coming back from 105, if he had just bought at 130, 150, 175, I do not believe he would have the same negative opinion that he holds today, which is irrationally strong, in my opinion. So, the 4680 ramp is going slow, but there are reasons to believe it could be improving, especially in terms of adding additional lines.
Yeah, could you see that they switch over to another battery technology? I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
Is it reasonable?
Yes. Yes. If all of a sudden they realize, look, because they made 4680 Model Ys in Texas,
Exactly.
but they also made 2170s. The question is, could you use 2170s and make a structural pack with it? And to me, the answer is yes. Why couldn't you? Maybe I don't see a reason why they couldn't just switch to a 2170 version. And also worth pointing out, on the charging curve, there was an update pushed out a few days ago to CYBERTRUCK that should improve your charging curve. This is not new. When the 2170s were first released, they charged a bit slower than people expected until they had it all dialed in and they knew what the real capacity was without causing damage. And if you look at other companies that are a little more hesitant to hesitate, if you will, I was running some numbers. Lucid just published their 10K, and in it shows their warranty accrual is $5,250 a car. No, $8,979 is what they set aside per car that they sold last quarter. They expect $9,000 on average in warranty repairs. And part of the problem is people say their efficiency is amazing. It's not amazing. Those cars are uncorked. If you uncorked a Model 3 and only expected to get 10,000, 50,000 miles out of it, it'd be a screaming beast. You'd tear the internals apart if you let it. That's what some manufacturers are doing. Tesla's taking a slower approach, making sure the 4680s are sufficiently robust before they improve the charging curve.
Yeah, that's reasonable to do. So, yeah, thank you for that, diving into the deep end here, because that's important. I mean, the Cybertruck, of course, the production numbers are relying on the 4680 production. This makes a lot of sense. But let's see how it unfolds. And of course, they could switch and stuff like this. So interesting. You touched on that. So maybe we're going to go now from the Cybertruck to a different topic, the Model Y production at Giga Texas, and then we can switch over to the other factories, I think, because it makes sense, because Model Y isn't only produced in Texas. So, but first of all, let's dive into that in Texas.
So the Model Ys in Texas those are the ones that have front and rear castings. I don't know of another location that actually does that. It doesn't result in a weight reduction, unfortunately, but it does simplify the production process. It reduces the number of robots, as you know, and it makes it, in terms of, there's a thing called stacking errors. So when you start at the bottom of a car, every piece you put on it gives you a little bit more error as you go up. And by the time you get to the top, you might have some visible inconsistencies. Mega castings eliminates that. It reduces it. So how's Texas doing? The volume appears very strong. I haven't seen a concrete number in a while, but every time you look at drone footage, the cars are just flying out and they're going straight onto trucks. Some of them are taken to Hutto, Texas, where they're loaded onto trains and they disappear by rail. A lot of them go onto car hauler trucks for delivery. Who knows where? I don't know. I assume the entire South and Southwest. But the vehicles are, the production is going well, and there is a lot of headroom to expand production. And my only question is, are there sufficient batteries? And I believe the answer to that is yes. But if they have to shift their supply beyond U.S. borders, it would create issues with them no longer being eligible for incentives. So they're hesitant to do that. And we're waiting to see more manufacturers get their factories up and running. But building a battery factory is very complicated and takes a whole lot of time. And that makes it so that you can have a long lead time between having the capacity and being able to actually use it. But I think the bigger concern for Texas-built Model Ys is a softening of demand.
Do you think Tesla needs to pump out a refreshed Model Y soon? Is that important? I mean, people see the Model 3 Highland now and think the Model Y kind of looks old now or something like this. Some might say that. I personally think they should adapt the design. I love the design, but what do you think? Do you think Juniper is that, or did we already see Juniper with LED lights inside of the car?
So one thing we know, they were exporting Model Ys from Shanghai to Canada because Canada doesn't have the 28% import tax. It's got I think 12%, which is what any imported car other than from Mexico or the US would face. So a reasonable import tax. When the light refresh of the Model Y happened in Shanghai, where they just added some new, like the lights on the dash and some new elements to normalize them between 3 and Y, they stopped exporting them to Canada. So Canada is now served by Texas and Fremont exclusively, where it used to be Texas, Fremont, and Shanghai. So I think that they don't want anyone in North America to get any ideas that they should wait. A light refresh like that could absolutely happen. It could absolutely follow a month or two from now. You wouldn't necessarily see the rear screen. You probably wouldn't see the ventilated seats, but you'd get a little bit on the interior just because it makes it so you don't have to have two sets of parts laying around. That could absolutely happen quickly. Would a Model 3 refresh level refresh of the Model Y spur sales? Absolutely. I know a lot of people who have a Model Y who would trade it in a heartbeat to get the new one if it had those things, if it had the rear seats, if it had the softer ride, the quieter ride, the insulated glass throughout. And one thing that I imagine you'll mention in your review is in terms of cost savings, the giant single sheet of glass that goes over the passengers' heads in the 3 and Y in your car is 2 pieces of glass instead.
Yep.
That is a huge cost savings. A giant piece of glass like that is expensive. And that also makes your repairs more affordable. And then all they had to do was put an interior crossbar, which no one minds. I put my kids in the car for the test drive, and they didn't even notice it until I pointed it out to them. And then you put speakers on it to divide the zones into different and more isolated sound, refreshing
and more
the Model
lights,
Y, and more lights,
kind of.
And I think that refreshing the Model Y in that way would absolutely spur sales. The only question is it the right time? Do they have the engineering headspace to focus on it? And I don't know the answer to that.